What's up, everybody? Welcome to the One Fun Guy podcast. I'm in my studio tonight hanging out. You may notice something different. I'm trying to see what I can do for the lighting, guys. I know it's kind of dim in here. I wanted to kind of give myself like a little ambient light. When I go live before, the screen up top was like, all of this was like getting flushed out. So I wanted to just come on and see how you guys like it. I could adjust the brightness. I could turn it down, tune it up. But I think this is good for me right now, hanging out, guys. I kind of like this setup. Obviously, when I do my podcast, I have the light on. So I just wanted to see if this was kind of a good setup for us, guys, if this is what we could do. If you guys are on, say what's up. If you're new here, welcome. Join us, guys. I appreciate it. Anna, thank you for all the likes. I appreciate it. If you guys are new here, say hi. It really means a lot to me. Welcome in, guys. I am going to share the show real quick. I'm going to get some people on. If you guys are here, please say hi. If you're new, welcome to the One Fun Guy podcast. If you are an OG, say what's up, introduce yourself. Guys, we have a very interactive chat. I really try to get as much people as I can on here. You guys like the lives. That means the world to me, guys. I really do appreciate it. It does mean the world to me. If you guys can go over to my podcast, One Fun Guy podcast over on YouTube, guys, and subscribe there, that would be even better. I just wanted to say thank you for everybody coming on. Davey, what's happening, man? How you doing? I know some of you guys are back and you recognize me and Kelly are going live tonight. I'm going to try and find him. So as soon as I do that, we are going to get this party started, guys. Tonight is going to be just a fun night. I really don't have many topics, so I'm not sure what we're going to talk about. We will obviously come up with some stuff. We always do. We are just kind of winging it tonight, guys. There aren't many topics that we haven't covered. There is a particular conversation that I will segue into about the metal community in itself. I'll wait for Kelly to get on. I always like his opinion on this kind of stuff. It really helps us have a great conversation about the community and what's going on and what we see and what we have. We talked about it quite a bit in our last couple podcasts about bands going on what they call one last tour, one last ride, one last concert, and we talked, is it a money grab or do they really care about the fans, why they're doing it? We watching Eagles and Cowboys, so I hope I don't know, guys. The Cowboys look rough this year. Davey, I hope you're not a Cowboy fan. I don't know the Eagles. I'm not sure how they're doing, but I know the Cowboys just made a horrendous trade and they're kind of, not doing it. So Will, what's up, buddy? Welcome back. So if you guys, are football fans, Patriots fan, there you go. So the Cowboys and Eagles, I guess, really doesn't affect you. The Pats are the Pats, right? Except for Bill Belichick, right? What happened in North Carolina? There was a great skit I saw the other day. So I'm from Texas. I don't watch Cowboys anymore. Guys, I'm from Chicago and I can't stand the Bears. I became a Lions fan last year for that reason. I am really just not a Bears fan. I don't like the way they run their organization. I don't like the way they draft. To be honest with you guys, I'm a football fan, and there are not many things the Bears are doing right. They are awful. I said they're going to win 4 games this season, and honestly, I don't think Caleb Williams is going to be the starting quarterback by the end of the season. I think Tyson Bagent is going to be the guy, and I think that the Bears are going to realize that they have to stop drafting shitty number 1 QBs out of college, because QBs in college don't equal to QBs in the pros. They just don't. It happened with all of ours. Trubisky was awesome. They picked Trubisky over Patrick Mahomes, right? Who knows what would have happened, right? If either one of that transition expires. But then they say, okay, he's not our guy. Justin Fields is our guy. 2 seasons later, Justin Fields isn't our guy. Caleb Williams is our guy. Tyson Bagent is their guy. He's an awesome quarterback. He knows the system. He knows he will be the Bears starting quarterback. That's my prediction. I'm going to say by week 7, Caleb Williams is out. Tyson Bagent's in. That's just me. And again, I really cannot stand the Bears. I hate the way they run their organizations. They treat their fans like shit. It's just a very, very poorly. Obviously, you guys can tell why I'm not a Bear fan anymore. Like I said, all these other teams that forementioned, the Patriots especially, right? The Eagles, especially, even the Cowboys, right? When they were in their glory years, right? The Cowboys were awesome, right? The Cowboys had some very good teams. So their cities were used to winning championships. The Bears haven't made the Super Bowl since 2008. They've made the playoffs twice, and they won the Super Bowl in '85. I mean, you're talking now 30 years ago. I mean, it's bad. It's a long wind of sorrow for Chicago sports teams. I'm hoping the Cubs could pull it through this year. The Sox are making some promising moves for next year. Obviously, baseball is still in its tail end. Most people are talking football, but the Bears, awful. So you guys that have great teams, enjoy them, because the Bears suck. And they will for a very, very long time, in my opinion. I don't see them being good for quite some time. Until they get rid of the management and the organization and they bring somebody in who actually knows how to run a team, we are completely fucked. With that being said, I'll move on to more, Urban and Smith, right? Aikman, the 90s. The 90s Cowboys were America's team, right? I mean, everybody loved the Cowboys. That team was great. I mean, Emmitt Smith was awesome. They had a great defense, right? They were kind of crazy, kind of, I remember when Nate Newton ran all the way down the field, right? And he's cheering, and here comes little Don Beebe sprinting behind him and gets the ball out of his hand, right? That Cowboys team was awesome, right? I mean, everybody was an Aikman fan, right? There weren't many people that didn't say he was the best quarterback in the league at the time, right? He was awesome. I mean, and what they did and how they did it together. I mean, Michael Irvin, with them, they had a just such a great team. I mean, that they were awesome, and kudos to them. I mean, Neon Dion was their DB. He was running all over the field, making plays like crazy. I mean, it was awesome, right? Yeah, I get it. And again, owners, in my opinion, I think Jerry Jones was a very good owner because he wanted to see what his coaching staff was doing. He wanted to see what his players were doing. He wanted to see how they were in the locker room, right? If you're going to invest $20 million in an athlete who's not going to do anything, you're going to get your ass down on the field and say, hey, what's going on? Why aren't you paying what we're paying you? And if you don't, we're going to cut your contract. So I think he did it as intimidation, right? When you get the owner coming down and you had a bad game, you're thinking twice, wow, is he down here to say something? Is he going to cut me, right? So he's the owner of the team. He does what he wants. You go on the field, do your thing, right? Greatest comeback in Super Bowl history, probably. I would say that one was good. Kurt Warner's playoff comeback was really good. I mean, there were a lot of comebacks, right? I mean, but Brady's the GOAT. So, I mean, you have the best quarterback in football history running your clock. I mean, that's a great thing. Peyton Manning had a bunch of them. Joe Montana came back from a few. Even the Brett Favre comeback was pretty good. Those are what great players do. Great players make great plays, and they come clutch. That's why they're great. Most quarterbacks couldn't do what they did. So, I get it. Will, to be honest with you, the Cowboys are in the same situation the Bears are in, right? The Bears had the Hellis family with the McCaskies, right? They're in right now in a very, very weird position, right? Because they are in a terrible, terrible slot. They have no real promising leads. And the family doesn't care about the team. It doesn't care about the fans. It obviously doesn't care about the players they pick. All they care about is making money. And as long as they're making money, that's all they care about, right? So for them, they're making money. Chicago fans are stupid. We keep coming to the games even though they suck. So we're the most dumb, ignorant fans you can get. And that's why the Chicago organization loves us, because we're stupid. What's up, buddy?
Hey.
That's my rant on the terrible Chicago Bears.
No, I joined at a time because I used to live in the Toronto area, right? It's the same argument for the Blue Jays, the Toronto Maple Leafs, the Raptors, right? It's like, people show up no matter what. It's a big enough city that people are going to pay to show up at the games no matter what. So if they lose, whatever, doesn't matter. The company itself is going to get its money anyway. Granted, there's a lot of extra money in the playoff scene, right? You know, so there's
Yeah.
financial interest in that. But yeah, no, I've just heard that.
Yeah, so
It's the same.
that's the
All
kind of the rant of Chicago sports teams, especially with us, because unfortunately we are just not very promising. But like I said, we are loyal diehard fans, which is great, but it's also a curse because we will watch them put the shittiest teams on the field and still cheer for them and still go buy tickets and still go to the games. I mean, look at what they did in Oakland. Their baseball team sucked. Fans stopped going. They had to sell the team, right? Nobody know. PBR, Redneck Margarita. Got any salt on that rim?
I I think to some extent too, it speaks a little bit to the culture of the city that you're in, right? You know, Chicagoans are pretty cool with complaining. Like you know, there's a certain satisfaction in being able to say how much their team sucks. You know,
Oh,
just as much as people did that in Toronto or New York for that matter.
yeah.
You know, in LA,
No,
whatever.
we bitch
You
and
know,
complain, but we still
that's
show
a
up.
place
That's the
to
problem.
take clients, but
Can you imagine if the people who had the Bears season tickets stopped going and said we are just going to sell them and we're not going to buy them back until you put a good team on the field? They would switch that organization in a heartbeat. But the Bears season ticket holders have been season ticket holders since the 1950s. They're not going anywhere. It's family generation, so it's a family thing to go to the games. So it doesn't matter what they put on the field. I mean, they could put 12 pieces of shit out there and let them do their thing, and they'd still be okay, right? I mean, they don't, nothing matters to them, right? You get 11 guys on the field and a coach, right? So you got pretty much 12 people on the sideline of the field. Bears don't care about any of that. They know that we're going to go and we're going to buy the beer, we're going to buy the hot dogs, we're going to buy the nachos, we're going to buy the beefs. They don't care about us and their winning team. All they really care about is them making money, and we buy their gear. We buy Bear stuff. We go to the games. We support the team. So it doesn't matter to them. It's a money making machine. And Chicago, unfortunately, is a sports loving city, and it's very blue collared, and we don't care. And once people stop showing up, they'll start caring. We still go to the games. So Cowboys fans, exactly. But the thing though is that the Cowboys did it right though. They have a dome. They make it comfortable for their fans at least. What Bear fan wants to go to the game in the middle of December when it's negative 20 degrees outside and you're sitting there freezing your ass off on a team that doesn't win? No one wants to do that. So at least the Cowboys did it right. They built a dome.
yeah, no, I mean that's I mean, you've lived here all your life. I mean, that's how America works. You know, it's like, whatever you do to make money is more important than whatever, right? You growing up in Sweden, I think that it was a little bit more, at least when I was growing up. I think it's changed now, but it was more about, having homegrown talent. Like you would have people as much as possible from your hometown that would represent your hometown, and you beat those damn big city idiots from Stockholm or whatever, right? So, um, but yeah, no, North American sports it's entirely profit based. I mean, that's how it is.
What sports were
And
big in Sweden?
I'm gonna say too, like you probably have the same situation here in Chicago as in Toronto too. It's like, you might have to wait for 40 years for a season ticket to open up to be able to get a hold of it. So if you decide not to go because you want the winning team on the field, you're not just gonna leave the seat empty, right? You paid for it. It costs a lot of fucking money to have it. So you would scalp it. Somebody else would.
Oh yeah,
would
for
take
sure.
it, so you'd get something out of it. So
Yeah. So I get it,
the
right?
seat is still filled. It's
Yeah.
not like half this stadium will be
Right.
empty because people
And,
are
and to go what Will's talking about, Will, I understand, right? You play in cold weather, you want to use it to your advantage, right? People that play in Green Bay, people that play in Chicago, people that play in cold weather climates, they want the open stadium. They want it to snow. They want it to rain and sleet. They want it to hail, right? That's what they're used to, right? But as a fan, now I'm 45 years old. I don't want to go to a game where it's sleeting and hailing and cold and chilly, right? I want to go where I'm covered. I don't care about the field, right? Let it rain on the field. Build a dome with the middle out. I don't want to go and sit where I'm freezing and I'm cold and my teeth are chatting and I go to work on Monday and my bones are hurting because I sat out in a game for 8 hours freezing my ass off, right? So as a fan now, Build a dome. Make me happy, right? I'm the one going to the game. I understand the players want to play in the cold. They want to use the wind to their advantage. They want to use the cold to their advantage. But let's remember, all these guys went to college, right? 99% of the NFL played football in Michigan. They played in Illinois. They played in all these states. It's not unfair to the guys that go down to Texas, right? When it's 120 degrees and they got to play a college football game when it's sweltering. Or the guys that have to go to Colorado where the stadiums are high and it's hard to breathe. There's all these intangibles. But as a fan, make me comfortable. That's all I'm asking. Right? I'm the one paying to go put those asses in the seat, right? I'm the guy in the seat. My money's going to pay your players. So make me comfortable. I could care less, right? But I get it. It's football. I understand. I played in college, right? I know what it's like, right? You want to use that stuff to your advantage. But now as a fan, make me comfortable, make me happy, and I'll come to the games.
Yeah, no, and there's no reason to have that either. And I mean, the players are from all over the place anyway, right? You know, like yeah, there are people that played in Michigan or whatever, but there's also players that played in Louisiana or Texas or Arizona or whatever, right? So and those players move around. So I don't think that it's necessarily that it's like, well, it's an even playing field just because this week we're playing here in Chicago, and next week we'll be down in Florida. You know, I don't think that the location matters. I think if anything, to level the playing field to see who's really the best football team is to have as equal of a playing field at any given location as possible. To be fair, right?
And to be honest,
the difference would be the how engaged the fans are, right? You know,
I was bored as shit last night, right? And I watched this thing on YouTube about Dick Butkus, right? They said he was the most feared linebacker in NFL history, right? Now you could argue that, right? But when they showed plays of him in the 1960s and 70s making these tackles and basically killing the other guy, that football is gone, right? That era is gone. The 80s, 90s of the hard hitting, you know, the Steve Atwaters tackling Christian Okoye are gone. That era of tackling is gone. That era of speed is gone. That era of finesse is gone. We are in the soft NFL now, right? Where if you go to tackle somebody and you lead with the crown of your helmet, you're getting flagged. If you pull somebody by the collar, right, which means you grab the back of their shoulder pads and you pull them down, you get penalized now, right? That was what you did back in the day. If somebody was getting by you, you grabbed whatever you could and pulled them down to tackle them. Now you can't horse collar. You can't spear. You can't, and I'm not saying you have to headhunt, but at the same time, that's football. That's what we were taught to do, right? When I was a kid playing in high school, my coach says, you see this right here, the Riddell sign. He goes, you put that into the chest of the guy you're going to tackle. You always led with your head. Now, they don't do that, right? They teach you not to lead with your head. You tackle with your shoulders. They never taught us that because the head is where the body goes. You know that from anything, right? From martial arts to wrestling to any athletic event, right? Where the head goes, the body goes. You put your head out there, your body's going to follow it. Now they don't teach you that. They teach you to put your head to the side, tackle with your shoulders. It's a different league. It's a different NFL. So I get your argument about that, but the reality is that it's a soft NFL. So at least make the fans happy. You protect them, right? Make them comfortable.
Yeah, no, cover the stadiums, make them comfortable, but also, you know, I'd say keep the athletes safe. You know, everybody gets stronger, everybody gets bigger, everybody gets you know, better trained and all that stuff. And obviously, there's been a huge focus on the injuries and post-career physical trauma that football players have gone through just because of that sort of like, we just shoved our heads into their bellies or whatever, right? At the same time, you know, the equipment is turning into armor, so it protects the players more, which means that you have to hit harder, which means that your brain damage gets even worse, and you know, all that stuff, right? So you know, nobody wants the athletes to die on the field.
No.
Usually, though. I mean, maybe some would like it to be more like actual life or death gladiatorial games, but
I get it.
but at the same time, I think like keeping it safe for the athletes too is significant.
I
So
get it. And I know
whether
it's
you like it or
comparing,
not, it
you know,
changes the game. I'm sure.
right. And I
If
know
there are
this is
things that you
comparing
can and
grapes
cannot
to
do.
watermelons, but at the same point, though, you have sports like boxing and UFC where you basically have the gladiator mindset. You took that
Mhm.
mindset out of football, right? The mindset of a football player when I was playing back in the 90s and 2000s, we had triple practices. We practiced 3 times in one day. We did Oklahoma drills where we basically you blow the whistle and two guys run at each other and they smack each other in the middle. The whistle blows, the next two guys run at each other, they smack each other in the middle. We did 2-on-3s. We did Oklahoma. We did the karaoke's, right? So you basically have two guys here, a guy in the back and a guy in the back. The whistle blows. These two guys hit. The guy in the backfield and the guy in the backfield try to tackle each other, right? You hit them as hard as you can. You practice the way you played. And now that era of football is over. You don't do triples anymore. You don't have 3 practices in one day. You don't sweat it out. I remember I was a sophomore in high school. I'll never forget. It was 1996. We had the heat wave. It was like 114 degrees for like 2 weeks in a row. Our football coach, why all the other schools were saying, hey, we're going to take a break. We're going to get water. We're going to do that. He said, every summer, the Florida Gators go down to the swamp and they practice in the 130-degree heat. And the humidity is high. He goes, they do that because if you're going to quit there, you're going to quit on the field anywhere. Well, we're not in the swamp of Florida, right? We were in Illinois. It just happened to be really hot. But that was the coach's mindset to get you to keep going, right? To play through the adversity of the heat. So they said, listen, the Florida Gators do this every summer. They go to the swamp and they practice in the middle of in the heat wave because of that reason. And so we're like, oh, yeah, well, if the Florida Gators do it, we should do it, right? We never complained, right? Can you imagine that now? Those high school kids would walk off the field. They'd be like, absolutely not. We said, all right, what? Just give us some water. We kept practicing. It's a different era. It's a totally different era of football. It's a different era of the game. Like I said, they took the gladiator mentality out of football, right? So basically, right now, the NFL is glorified flag football. They're still the greatest athletes on the planet, right? They're physically fit, they're in shape, they're strong, they're mobile, they're everything that you want NFL players to be, except they took that like killer instinct out of football, right? They just don't have it anymore. You will never see another Troy Polamalu again, right? You'll never see another John Lynch again, right? You just don't have defensive backs that are built like that, right? They're just not running around hitting people. They patty cake now, which is fine. You want to keep the athletes safe. I get that. But at the same point, I'm paying to see a battle and I'm not getting it. I'm getting a half-baked kind of fizzled down, watered down football. And so it is what it is. I understand it. But at the same point, it's also now a gambler's sport, right? They made betting illegal. So football now is basically coerced into a money-making machine, which, fair enough. You want to be a billion-dollar, organization, so be it. But at the same time, you took away football. That's just my opinion. It's just not the same game it was 20 years ago. It's not.
Yeah. No, I don't watch much football, so I can't speak to it very much, right? So I see where you're coming from. But I have watched a lot of hockey. I mean, I haven't watched it much in the past 15 years or so, right? But in Canada, there was this guy called Don Cherry he was an old school, like he made a name for himself by being a tough guy in hockey.
Mhm.
Like he was a fighter,
True.
he was an intimidator. He was like you know, because that's part of the game of hockey. It's like, there are some people that are out there for no other reason than to piss people off. They don't have to be good players. They can just
Sure.
get the mentality off on the opposing team. They can just get so pissed off at this one guy. So anyway, that's what he was good at. But when the 80s and 90s hit, well, I think he was fine in the 80s, but when the 90s hit, and the technology evolved so rapidly, the shoulder pads were no longer just sort of pads. They were like, hard pieces of plastic, layered, couple of layers of that, so you could not get hurt, right? Basically, right? For sure you can, but the thing is too that when you combine that with the skates getting better. Everybody's training harder too. They're getting faster. They're getting better at skating. The all the other equipment is getting lighter. So what happens is that playing like they did in the 80s, in the mid 90s, was that you got hit by a fucking tank. Concussions went through the roof. So that's why they also have now, like, they have a doctor come up after you got a big hit to shine a light in your eye and see, like, are you showing any signs of potential concussion symptoms? And if so, I'm going to take you back to a dark room and check you just to make sure that you're not hurt, right? So it's a little bit of that too. Like, technology caught up to the ability a little bit, so it turned into a danger very quickly that wasn't there before. So people that signed up and started practicing as kids in the late 70s, early 80s or whatever, right, ended up in a fucking, like, being hit by a truck thing in the 90s, and they could not complain, because the second you complained, you were off the team. It's like, oh, you can't take a fucking hit, off you go, right? In the meantime, then, you would live the rest of your 40 years that you had left or whatever, like with a constant tinnitus or headache or migraines or whatever it may be, if you could even still move, whatever, right? There was a mismatch there in terms of physical ability and the equipment and what it actually did to the human body. I think that there's a little bit of a difference here, that when we're talking about like UFC or boxing or whatever, right? Because that is, people know going in, right? That, yeah, we're doing bare knuckle fighting at times, right? There's a foot that's going to hit me, with the speed of 180 miles an hour, hard block of rock, right? That's the name of the game, right? While in football, the hitting is a portion of it, but it's not the entire game of football. Like, it's still the throwing, it's still the the running, it's still the tactics, it's still so much more around that. So I don't know. I'm a little bit conflicted.
So here's the deal, though, right?
You see what I mean?
Because sports purists would argue that hockey is still the one sport that really hasn't changed. They haven't changed the rules very much. They still hit, they still check, they still cross check, they still do everything. They do everything that they did 20 years ago, and they still do it at a speed level. Sure, they do. Football doesn't do that anymore. They just simply do not.
No. Football. I'm sorry. I'm going to have to cut you off on that.
No way. Not for hockey.
Yeah, there was such a huge, at least in Canada, 15 years ago, when I was really into it, people were saying that hockey was being pussified. It's like, you can't touch each other anymore, and all that stuff. That was because so many people
maybe in Canada,
unnecessarily hurt.
But in the United States, it hasn't changed that much. Honestly, hockey is still the one sport where most purists would say they watch hockey because it hasn't changed that much. The speed has gotten better, the hits have gotten harder, the finesse has gotten better. That's the one sport they argue. Now, for football, the number one basic rule of football, right, was hitting is what you did. You tackled people. That was everything was built around that, right? So football at its core, sure, you have a quarterback who could throw, you have a running back who could run, you have a bunch of linemen that just kind of go at it, but they hit constantly. Hitting was part of football. That was what you did it for, right? Now they took away the hitting. So yes, it is more focused on throwing and running and catching, but at its deepest, rootest core, football was meant to be hit. It was a combat sport. Now they took all the combat out of the sport. Hockey is still combat at its core. Hitting is still what they do. You don't go join a hockey league at a junior level and not expect to get hit. You are going to get hit. You're going to get cross-checked. You're going to go into the glass. Hockey still lets the guys take the gear off and fight. They still duke it out on the middle of the ice, right? You get two grown men wailing on each other. You would never see that. In football, if you throw a punch at another guy who's wearing a helmet, you get ejected from the game, right? So at its core, they don't let the guys fight anymore. The referees are all over the athletes. They're all over it. And again, football at its core was hitting. It's what you did. If you didn't want to get hit, you didn't play football. It was as simple as that. And trust me, I hated getting hit, right? When I played college, I was 6'2", 280 pounds. I was in great shape. I loved hitting people, but I hated getting hit. No one wanted to get crushed, right? No one wanted to get concussed. No one wanted, you did the best you could to protect yourself. But the reality is you played because you knew you were going to get hit, right? So as many times as I gave somebody a good licking, I got one back. So you knew that was the course. Hockey's the same way, right? When you go into a batter's box in baseball, right, you know that there's a chance that you might get hit with a 90-mile-an-hour fastball. It's just going to happen. You're going to get hit one of these days, right? So you understand the course of the sport, but at its core, football was based on athleticism and hitting, and they took the hitting out of it. So now it's based on athleticism. Hockey, I would argue, was based on hitting and skating and finesse, and they still have all three of those components to hockey. They took the hitting out of football. Yeah. And that's what sucks.
Yeah, there might be some fine tuning. Maybe hockey actually. I mean, I haven't watched hockey in a while now, so I can't say. But I do know that they were tweaking it a lot, and sure, players were very confused at the time, as in, what am I allowed to do? What am I not allowed to do? So I'm sorry that I'm talking more hockey than football here, but I do know more.
But I mean, hockey. look at hockey.
But the thing is that they started to put things in as like, you cannot body check a guy if you have taken more than 3 strides. Like, you can't line one up from the other side of the ice and just go for it and just get the speed you want and then just crush the fucking guy. Then you're out. Like.
Right, but again, too, how many hockey teams in the league right now?
They definitely put rules in place at the time, at least. I don't know how much it's been going back and forth.
I mean,
but I know that
I mean, there are still guys on a hockey team.
There was a 3-stride rule, like you can't hit someone if you've taken 3 strides before, type of thing. And I know the poke checking was also, like you could only poke check in certain situations and shit, and players who got really confused by, I don't understand the rules. There are too many rules. I don't know what to do.
So at least in America, I think with hockey, they did impose a lot of the rules that go against that grain, right? So they did impose the cross check. You can't do the tap, right, where you had the stick and you were behind a guy and you hit him on the leg, right? Back in the day, that was a real popular thing, right? You can't do that anymore, right? But the NHL still has enforcers on the team, right? Guys that might be subpar, but you get a guy who's 6'4", 250 pounds, and all he is going to do is hurt the other guys, right? They don't care about if he scores, if he's a defensive player. All they want to do is intimidation, right? You don't have that anymore. Right. So in hockey, sometimes you have a guy that's just a great fighter and is a shitty hockey player, but you put the skates on him and you let him go at it, right? He's the guy that's going to be like, you're not going to fuck with my guys, and I'm going to show you you're not. In the NFL, you don't have that anymore. Those days are gone. You don't have the Bruce Smiths. You don't have the John Randalls. You don't have the Greg Lloyds, the Kevin Greens, right? Those guys, that era is gone. Kevin Green was an okay linebacker, right? He was good, but he wasn't, the most fastest or best guy. But what he would do is they put him in the game so he would knock the quarterback's head off, right? That's what he did. He was a headhunter. He would literally just run full speed at a quarterback. The guy's already thrown the ball. He didn't give a shit. He run him over, right? John Randall was like that, right? John Randall just went after running backs. He didn't care. The little guys, there's a great video of him. I forgot, it was him and the little Warwick Dunn from Tampa, right? John Randall picked him up and speared him and brought him to the ground, right? Now, in today's day, he would have probably killed him, right? But Tampa got fired up and they put Mike Alstott in the backfield, and they basically said, you're going to try to do that to Mike Alstott. So John Randall tried to do that. Mike Alstott ran him over. You don't have guys like that in the NFL now, right? If that happened, they would all freak out and be like, oh, what do we do? This guy's crazy, right? Back in the day, you put another crazy guy in the backfield and say, all right, now try it with him. And that's what they did. Like I said, Steve Atwater ended Christian Okoye's career on one tackle. Christian Okoye was unstoppable. They call him the Nigerian Nightmare. He's one of the best running backs ever in the NFL. And little Steve Atwater at 185 pounds ended his career because he hit him so damn hard, he literally shook him to the bone. Okoye got up and was dazed. He had no idea where he was. After that season, he never played again. Atwater literally ended his career in one hit.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
again, you have guys that were they were built for that, right? Troy Polamalu, as a football player, right, was a great athlete. But the guy was a football player. He knew how to tackle. He knew, and you didn't want to get hit by Polamalu. The guy was just pure speed and adrenaline. John Lynch was that way, right? John Lynch played safety. John Lynch hit like a linebacker at 220 pounds, right? Nobody wanted to get hit by this guy. And you knew that if you were playing the Buccaneers, you didn't want to throw into that backfield because Lynch was going to hit you and hit you hard. So he was so intimidating that, they would dump passes to the tight end to get a few yards here and there because nobody wanted to throw a deep ball on John Lynch because they knew they were going to get walloped. How many teams in the NFL now can you say you're afraid to throw to their backfield? Not many. There aren't many teams that are like, wow, they have a really imposing backfield, or wow, this guy is really, intimidating as far as a football player goes, right? They've taken all that out of the game now, right? The last one I remember was the linebacker for the Ravens. I can't think of his name now. I can see he had the paint that he used to wear down to here, right? He was the last real linebacker in the league that people were afraid to run his way. There aren't many like that now. Most guys don't have that intimidation factor anymore. They go out there to collect a check. They're big and buff and they look good in pads, but they're really not football players. They're not intimidating. They don't scare anybody. And back in the day, you had guys that would actually run away from opponents because they knew they were going to get hit and get hit hard.
Yeah, I guess that becomes a philosophical question a little bit, right?
Sure.
So what are we looking at, right? Do I want to play football because I'm a good ball player? And if I'm up against, a guy who could, if he got to me, would end my career, is it worth it? If I'm going to end up in a wheelchair after one game, is it worth playing this game? Right?
So I, again, at this level, though, I think that when you in high school, I could easily see that playing, right? You get a kid in high school that's 150 pounds and he's not very athletically inclined and he's only playing because his dad wants him to play and he wants to be put in a uniform and he wants to do all that stuff, right? So you could argue that case, right? That if you put this kid in who's not very athletic at all at 130 pounds, he's going to get hurt, right? If he gets hit by a guy that's 250 pounds, he's really going to do some damage, right? But then when you start to get into the college levels, it's the cream of the crop, right? You are confident in yourself that you made it to the collegiate level, that you're not afraid of the next guy, right? He might be a little bit bigger than you. He might be a little bit stronger than you. He might be a little bit faster than you, but you have the skill and the ability to go head to head with him. You're not really afraid to tackle that guy, or you're not afraid to go toe to toe with him. When you make it to the NFL, that's the 1% of the best athletes in college football that are going to make it to the NFL. You know that you're there because you are the best, right? So that intimidation factor is gone because you're now the alpha, right? You know that you want that guy, right? If you're a running back, you want to run against the biggest guy in the backfield, right? You say that offensive lineman is going to block for me and I'm going to run behind him and that defensive guy isn't going to touch me. And if he tries, I'm going to outrun him, right? And that's the philosophy of the NFL athletes. So high school is where you would say that guy's really going to hurt me. College, you're not really that way. You're very competitive and you're there. And in the pros, nobody's going to hurt you because you're an NFL athlete. You're not ever thinking about your career ending, right? So at that level, no, the argument to me doesn't exist, right? You could say there's always a chance, right? At the collegiate level and the pro level, if I twist my knee or I tear my ACL or I tear my MCL, season-ending surgery, I'll come back next season, right? With a bigger, stronger knee, right? Break a bone, it's going to heal, right? Those kind of stuff. You're never looking at the fact that this play, if I run against this guy, is going to end my career, right? You go hard, he goes hard, he gets the best of you. But you're not afraid at that point. There's no fear in you. So at that level, I would say that's very hard pressed for somebody to say on a high school or a peewee level, of course, right? Because there are just some high school students that don't even want to be on the field, but their parents want them to play football. So they go out there because their mom and dad wants them to. They're terrified. They don't practice. They're frigid in their own shadow. And here they are wearing pads. That's where somebody's going to get really hurt. right? If somebody who's been playing for a long time, a freshman comes in and he doesn't know what's going on, and a senior runs him over, yes, he's going to get hurt very badly. But at the college level, no, and at the pro level, definitely not.
I definitely see your point. That makes perfect sense.
So
I rest my case.
yeah. Now, however, there is always the attitude, right, of when you do get hurt. Once that happens to you, right, that's where I think the fear comes in, because you're going to say, I went full speed on that play and I tore my ACL, or I tore my MCL, or I dislocated my shoulder. Now you go through the rehab, your shoulder's better. When you start getting back in, that's in the back of your mind now. If I make that same play and I get hit again, am I going to bust my shoulder again? Am I going to tear my other knee? Am I going to, right? That's where the head games start to come in. And then age is another factor, right? When you're 21, 22 years old, right? And you're at the peak of level of your performance, right? And you think you can do everything, right? Now you're 30, you're 9 years into the league, and another 21-year-old guy comes in that's bigger and faster and stronger than you, right? And you are trying to maintain your level. What do, right? So that's where I think a lot of the headspace starts to come in, where a guy might say, listen, I just don't have it anymore at 30 years old. I'm not the same guy I was at 21, and every year I'm losing a step. So now it comes to the point in their career where they say, listen, am I going to hang it up? Or, because I think the average NFL career is 4 years, I think is the average. Guys that play 18, 19 seasons are doing something right? You're Peyton Mannings and you're Brett Favre's and they're doing something very, very right. And
they're not the linebackers. They're the ones
right.
that are protected, right? They're not the ones that are getting hit, every play, right?
Yeah. So again, you look at it from that standpoint. Most of the guys in the NFL are going to just have a short run. But I think your point goes into when you get hurt the first time, yes, you are a little timid and you're a little scared, because you're like, I almost had a career-ending injury and I just got back from it. Am I going to sustain another one? Am I going to second guess my speed and my accuracy and my playing ability because I don't want to get hit again? That's where I think that comes into play.
That's not quite what I was saying, but it's borderline, right?
That would be the argument that I would
remember.
So your point is that if you are going to have any thoughts in your head about that, it's after an injury, and especially a bad one too, if you sustain a bad one.
I'm thinking a little bit sideways. So let me explain. Like, you've seen the movie Slapshot, so yeah. Ogie Ogilvy is the guy that, when he's on the ice, he'll be able to take your eye out with his stick. Like, that's what he does, right? There in hockey, there are real life examples too. Like, if you were up against Bob Probert, you knew that he was going to do every fucking dirty thing he could possibly do, and he would want to kill you. And he had sent numerous people to the hospital, right? So despite the fact whether you had been hurt before or whatever, but you knew that if you were in the face-off circle and Bob Probert was against you, he was not interested in the puck. He was interested in dropping his fucking gloves immediately and punch the living shit out of you, right? So that's what I'm saying. That you were saying like Palomalo or whatever other names that are like known for injuring people when just from running into them, whether you've been injured or not or whatever, right? If that's the way that they identify themselves too, like, yeah, I'm the fucking headhunter. I'm out there to hurt people. This is why I'm out here. And if you're in my way, if you're the guy in front of me in the line, you better fucking watch out, or you're gonna, so if you are that guy and you've seen like, there's been 10 guys before me that have been destroyed, then that's when you probably start to wonder, like,
sure,
why am I here?
So I could see that, right?
You signed up for it, you're getting paid for it. I get it, but
and there are guys in the league, right, that have had that kind of intimidation factor to them, but just as many people have that there's always going to be another team that's going to come in and say, listen, we don't care about Bob Probert and his toughness and his thing. We're just going to skate faster than he does because he's not going to be able to catch up to us. So we don't care if he gets to us or not, right? And so those players are needed, right? But it gets to the point where I think a lot of the pros at that point aren't thinking like, they're thinking this guy's a joke, right? The only reason why he does that is because he can't play hockey. He's a fighter, right? He's not a good hockey player. He's a good fighter. We're good hockey players, so forget him. So
right,
I think
but he could end your career with a fucking good talk to the jaw, right?
But that could be the case for a lot of these guys, right? Like, I mean, Dustin Bufflin with the Blackhawks, right? The guy's 6'7". All he did was go out and hurt people, and he made it known that he was going to do that, right? And he was intimidating to that point, right? He's a big dude, and that's kind of where you're at. But in the same mode of what they're doing and the way that they're doing it and the way that everything is happening and it's breaking down, the reality is I think at some point the athlete's going to say, listen, yeah, he might be a little scary and he might be, but I'm better. And I don't care about that. And then, look at the young guy that ended Bob Probert's career, right? Like, he can't do it anymore. These young guys are kicking his ass all over the place. He's got to hang it up, right? So at some point, yeah, you might have your glory year or years, but I mean, the reality is that the better hockey player is going to outwin that in any situation, right? It's not the fact that he's an intimidating human being. That's true, right? He's crazy. He's missing all his teeth. He didn't care about pain. Guys would knock him out. He'd get back up, right? He's just that kind of guy. But at the same point, that level of intensity, you can't do that for very long, right? And so, you are intimidating for the years that you're there, but look at the longevity guys, right? Your Jaromir Jagrs and your Wayne Gretzky's and your, the guy that played on the Detroit Red Wings for 20 years, Yzerman. Those guys were good hockey players, right? That's why they played in the league for 20 plus years. They weren't the subpar tough hockey player. Those guys skated around those guys, and that's why they lasted, and that's why they had the longevity. I don't think those guys were ever afraid of Bob Probert, in my opinion.
Yeah, no, but I mean, Bob Probert was around for a good decade and a half. The Ty Domis, there were a bunch of them that were around for quite a while too. But I think, so I'm not disagreeing with you necessarily here, right? But I think that maybe what the leagues are doing, both in hockey and football, what they have been doing is to sort of discourage teams from having these typecast injury-seeking, like destroyers on their teams. Whose only purpose is to hurt physically other players. Let's get rid of those people that are just out to injure, and let's encourage teams to have more of those people that actually want to play the game.
Yeah.
For better or worse. But that could have been a philosophy of it, right? Let's get rid of the brutes.
I think with modern day sports, unfortunately, is professional sports teams look at their players as investments, and you're going to do what you can to protect your investments. You don't want your investments to get hurt. So I think at the way that it is now, the old school NFL
benefit cost for a football player, my God.
So that's the thing, right? Back in the day, I think they looked at football players as like, you are a quality athlete between this year and this year and this age and this age. And you are going to go as fast and as hard as you can for those years. If you make it past that, awesome. If you don't, there's somebody else in the works. Now, I mean, look at what they're paying quarterbacks. $500 million, $400 million, $300 million, right? No quarterback ever got that kind of money. If you're giving somebody $500 million, you don't want anybody touching them. You might as well just give them a red helmet and say, don't touch my guy, right? And that's what the NFL is doing. They're making it easy to protect their investments. That's it. I mean, there's no secret behind it. You get a good running back in the league, right? Back in the day, a good running back maybe lasted 4 or 5 seasons, right? Very rarely did you have a guy that lasted 8 or 9 years as a running back. There were only a handful of them, right? Now, you look at the NFL, a running back doesn't even exist anymore. They're like, a running back, who's that, right? Back in the day, if you didn't pick a draft pick as your number one quarterback, you picked a running back because they were the 2 most important people on the field. Now, running backs go in like the 4th round. No one gives a shit about a running back. Fullbacks don't even exist. Halfback isn't even heard of.
Yeah.
You know,
So you can think about that too. Like, so where did this whole change come from, right? Did it
money.
come from the coaches? It's like, I need a good fucking quarterback. That's the guy I want, but he's fragile, so I need to protect it at any cost. And the GM says, okay, cool, I see your point. And then he goes to the owner, and the owner says, how much is it going to cost me? And then that owner, who owns like a multi-billion-dollar team or whatever, right, goes to the league and says, look, guys, this is what
Sure.
you got to do. And the league, probably thinks about it, and they have their board meetings or whatever, right? So it could be like a series of people that have skin in the game, like literally, that have been making this happen. And it could even have been like, the player himself saying like, yeah, I'll sign for you for whatever money, but you guys have to protect me. you know
Yeah. So I
so
think,
who knows how far down the line all these arguments have gone for years and years and years to trigger these sort of rule changes and whatever, right?
yeah, and that's the
Because
thing,
I
right?
mean, like you said, like the highest paying people are the ones that, well, quarterback always, right? And whoever scores the most points, right? The linebacker in the middle, rarely, you have a few examples, I'm sure, but they're rarely the ones that get the $1 billion contracts, right? So nobody cares about them in terms of money, right? Um, so the money to be protected, the investment that needs to be saved, are the people that make the highlight reels.
Right. And so,
Like
you look
a
at
linebacker.
you look at very few teams that have the assemblance, right? I like it now because I see it with the San Francisco 49ers, right? They put a lot of money in George Kittle, right, as a tight end. He's very flamboyant. He's got a great personality. He's very funny. He's easy to talk to, right? They put a lot of their money into George Kittle, right? Their quarterback's okay. They're not doing horrible, right? But your quarterback is your face of your team, right? The quarterback is the guy that they're going to put everybody on your shoulders. You got to be able to talk. You got to be suave. You got to be funny. You got to crack jokes, right? Peyton Manning was like the ultimate QB, Joe Montana, right? Joe Namath, Broadway Joe, right? Those were guys that you could invite into your house and they would make you laugh. They would tell jokes. They would tell stories. They'd be the entertainment of the team, right? Your linebackers usually aren't your funny guys, right? And if you happen to get one that is kind of funny and does his thing, right? Khalil Mack with the Bears was a great example, right? Khalil Mack gave awesome interviews, right? He cracked jokes. Here's a guy that could easily be in a quarterback persona, but he's a linebacker, right? Usually you don't find that. Your linebackers are usually your strong, silent types, right? They're not very good in front of the microphone. They're not very good with interviews. All their stuff is on the field, right? But now you're starting to see the flamboyant NFL, right? Where you start to see the guys in their true, nature of doing things in their personas. And they're not quarterbacks now, right? They're just not. Their tight ends, their linebackers, their DBs, their defensive ends. They're very good outside of what they do. They're not just the grunt, mean looking guys anymore. They're your better athletes, right? And I think it happened a lot in the Patriots organization, right? Because you had Tom Brady, who was great, but who was the funny guy in that team? It was Gronk, right? Gronkowski was the comedian.
Yeah.
Everybody wanted to interview Gronkowski. Nobody really cared about Tom Brady. They liked Brady, right? Because he looked good. But if you wanted to talk to somebody on that team, you were going after Gronk. He was the comedic guy of the team.
Yeah. Brady is stupid and boring. Good player, obviously, but whatever.
Right. So,
no. I mean so that also comes into the budget thing too, right? Like, who is going to give us attention? Who's going to give us media time? Who's going to get the public's interest? Like, that's a super, super important part. It's like, that's almost sometimes more important. Who cares about what racer actually shaves best? But the ones that have the coolest commercials are the ones that are getting the better sales.
Yeah.
It's that's the way it works. But I to what you were saying though, I think that that's a little bit of a positive too. Is that it used to be the running back, the wide receiver, the quarterback. Those were like the three guys that got all the attention or whatever, right? They got all the money, and then you could be the best fucking linebacker on the planet, and you could barely afford to retire after the 4 years if you managed to last that long.
So it just came to my head, and I don't know why it popped in
the NFL. So I'm glad that I'm actually glad that there are some linebackers that are getting that kind of attention.
Yeah. So the guy I was thinking of that played for the Ravens was Ray Lewis. Do you remember Ray Lewis? Ray Lewis was an awesome linebacker.
I've heard the name. Again, I'm not a huge
fan. He was funny as hell. When they interviewed Ray Lewis, he was the comic relief of that team, right? Ray Lewis was the guy everybody wanted to interview, and he was a linebacker. And he was the one that brought notoriety to other positions. And that was the great thing about Ray, was that I didn't personally like him, right? He stabbed a guy in a bar. He almost killed a guy, right? He was one on trial for murder and won, right? So the guy's crazy. But the reality of the fact is that he was an entertaining guy. He was likable. He would crack jokes and you liked him, and he made you forget about all that bad stuff about him, right? Again, I'm not here to judge. I'm just saying he was a funny guy. Like, I liked watching Ray Lewis play football. He was a ferocious athlete. He was an awesome linebacker. But at the end of the day, when he took his helmet off, he was the funny guy on the field, right? People they loved Ray Lewis. And that was the great thing about him, right? We had Urlacher in Chicago. Urlacher was awesome. But you interview Urlacher, man, it was like you'd rather interview this rock, right? He was terrible, and that was the thing, right? They basically offset him, which is fine. I mean, his job is to make plays for football. But when you look at guys on the team like Peanut Tillman, right? Tillman was awesome because Tillman could do an interview like crazy. People loved Charles Tillman, right? Peanut was great, but again, that was his persona. He was a funny guy, and like he got to showcase that.
It gets a little bit back to, again, we're trying to do the circle thing, but where we started, like, why do people show up to see the game, right? And there's definitely a team factor, just loving the sport and it's my local team or whatever, but it's also like there's that guy, there's that name that I recognize, and I see that person there on the field. Like there's a little bit of that, celebrity awe type stuff too. So a team definitely wants to have those people that are big mouths, that are, that are making headlines or quotable quotes or whatever. So someone would feel like, I want to show up and see that guy. Yeah. I mean, we can look at, Kelsey too, that hasn't had that, maybe I'm wrong, but I know that his last season wasn't all that great or whatever, right? But still, people want to go and see Kelsey because he's Taylor Swift's fiance now, right? Or whatever, right? So whoever makes the media are still making people come in and put their
well, Jason was the funny one, right? Jason Kelsey was the funny brother. If you've ever watched their podcast, Jason is the one that gets the comedic laughs going, right? I love Jason Kelsey. He's so much more funny and Travis is funny. Don't get me wrong. Travis has got a good personality, right? He's kind of the good fit between athlete and stardom, right? Just because of Taylor Swift. But Jason's the funny brother. If you watch the podcast with the Kelsey brothers, it's something Heights. I can't remember what it is. But Jason is the funny one. Jason is awesome. Jason's the brother you want to hang out with.
I'm sure of it. Yeah. No, I mean, I'm sure, and I think that I'd enjoy hanging out with Taylor Swift too, to be honest. Like, it seemed like all good people to me,
right?
If you ask me. But sorry about my dog.
No worries.
Dante. Shh. Okay. But yeah, no, but you see what I mean? Like, it's a football team is a marketing machine. It's a company. So it needs to create appeal in all sorts of ways. And it's not just on the field, right?
And it's true, right? The NFL took a playbook right out of soccer, right? The European soccer leagues, right? They wanted to market it as a money making machine, right? They took a little bit of F1, they took a little bit of baseball, they took a little bit of soccer. You know, the NFL, like I said, they turned it into what it is now, right? The NFL is a great, great thing, you know, in terms of giving, you know, people things to do on a Sunday afternoon, right? It just gets people's mind away from like the work and the stuff like that. But again, look at what soccer did in Europe, right? And the money that was involved with that and the organization of teams and stuff like that. That's what the NFL molded themselves into, right? They said, okay, what are they doing there, right? F1 builds a team. You got a driver, you got a pit crew, you got a marketing, you got people behind them, and you got sponsorships, right? So the NFL says, well, if they're able to do that, we can too, right? So there's no secret to what they were doing. They said, listen, we need to have sponsorships, we need fans, and we need this big thing, right? Because like I said, sports in the 40s and 50s is not the same sports we have today, right? Look at the baseball and football players. They would play 12 games, and then when football season wasn't going on, they went back to the mill and worked, right? They went back to the iron mill. They went back to farming. They worked for 4 or 5 months, and then they would spend a month of training, and then a month, 2 months playing football, and then they would go back to work, right? There was no such thing as an athlete being an athlete and making money on it, right? These guys were secondary athletes. They still had jobs that they went back to work to in the off season. Baseball players did it all the time, right? They play in the summer, in the winter, they go to work. So this, you know, reality that we live in now, where these athletes are able to buy these huge houses and they marvel, you know, movie stars and all this stuff, right? Is football now really the number one thing on their mind? You got to ask yourself that, because I don't think it is, right? I don't think the NFL athlete now, I don't think his number one goal is winning or football. It's money. And once they have that guaranteed contract, they don't care. And unfortunately, I think that the league that we watch now, it's just not the same league as it was. And again, is money the root of all evil? Maybe it is. I don't know. I don't have enough of it to know. But like I said, if somebody paid me $50 million to do my job half-assed and I didn't have to do it, would I do it? That's all I'm saying. I think a lot of these NFL guys now,
Absolutely.
I think a lot of these guys right now, I think their money and investing and everything else is first, and football is now secondary. And before, when these guys were working and they were lucky enough to play a sport, they appreciated it a lot more. I don't think the NFL now, especially the NFL, more so than any other sport, basketball, I'll argue that too, but I don't think their focus is sport anymore. I think it's pay. It's money and then sport.
I think you're absolutely right, and I think that some sports are more influenced by that than others now, or have grown to be more, you know, an effect of socioeconomics. And I'm starting to sound like a fucking intellectual asshole here, but
No, and
I
it's the
really do,
truth.
I really do think that, especially with the situation in the United States, where it's really hard if you're on the lower end of the income spectrum to break out of that. You know, one of the ways to do that is to be an excellent athlete, right? You know, so people in lower income communities where there's a lot of crime or struggles or whatever else, and it's like, how the hell can I get out of this environment as a kid, and you hate it. It's like, well, what if I become a really good basketball player, really good football player, and to be honest, I don't give a shit what happens to me physically, because, you know, it's better than getting shot, which is even worse. You know, I can get tackled as hard as you possibly can, and that will still be less than getting shot. You know, you see what I mean, right? You know, and some other communities are kind of like that too, like Brazil with soccer there too. It's kind of like, you know, a way of breaking out of those favelas and you know, African countries as well, right? You know, it is definitely a way out
Sure.
to break out of the poverty and hardships that you are. And I think that also gets you into that what you were saying, the fighting mentality of, it's like, I don't really give a shit if I get hurt like crazy. I'm still gonna get up and show that I can do this shit, you know.
Hmm.
And then a coach or an investor or whatever thinks like, well, that's the right stuff. That's the kind of people that we want, and then you throw money at them. So they're not necessarily in it for the sport itself. They just want to get the hell out of a specific situation.
Sure.
I think that's becoming more and more common, to be honest.
Yeah.
Not always, but I do think that it's becoming more and more common.
Yeah. And the thing is that, you know, it's a harsh reality when you get to that level and you realize it's not going to work out for you, right? Because in high school, you know, they always give you that little aptitude test, right? What do you want to be when you grow up, right? And somebody who's really good at math says, I want to be an engineer. And somebody who's really good at science says, I want to be a biologist. And somebody I said, I want to be a pro athlete, right? So that was my answer, right? They were like, you're not going to be a pro athlete. I'm like, yes, I am, right? So when I got to college, right, I looked back at high school. There were only 4 of us that graduated in my senior class that went on to play college football. I was one of them. There were 3 other guys, right? So I looked back at high school and said, listen, you told me that I should have been a scientist. I should have been an accountant. I should have been a biologist. I should have been, you know, a history major. And I said I wanted to be a pro athlete. So I got the last laugh at high school, right? So when I got to college, it was the same thing, right? They're like, you got to pick a major. I'm like, well, I'll pick something I enjoy, but I'm going to be a pro athlete, right? Like, I don't need a major, right? I'll take communications, you know, and I'll coast my way as long as I maintain C eligibility to play NCAA football. That's all I wanted to do, right? Now, obviously, it got to the point when I was a junior, and I'm like, all right, I don't really know if I'm good enough to make the pros, right? So what am I good at? What am I going to fall back on? What am I going to do, right? So that's when that interest started to peak. But when you're a junior in college and you are that good, right? And your coaches are talking to you about draft eligibility and the possibility of the NFL, right? Now your focus is not on academics. It's now on football, right? So now you don't have these kids learning about the world and learning at a college level. You have them focused and hyper-focused on the NFL, right? Now, you take a standard 52-man collegiate roster, right? Maybe 3 guys out of that 53 will actually make the NFL, and probably one of them will be a mainstay on a team. The other ones might go to a practice squad or get subcontract for a Canadian Football League, or you know, they had arena football at one point, right? You had guys that were that, right? So out of those 52 players on that college team, 3 of them, if they're lucky, will even be considered to be NFL eligible, and one of them might get drafted, right? So now you're talking, again, about the top 20 players in the nation that are going to get a guaranteed NFL contract. The rest of the 100 guys have to earn that spot on an NFL roster, which is very hard to do after cuts, right? So yeah, you might be able to say you played or you tried out for a team, but are you actually going to make it? No. And that's the sad reality when you look at, you know, the kids, right? You know, that aptitude test in high school, looking back on it now, right? I was able to say I beat those odds, right? Because I said I wanted to be an NFL player, right? But how many other high school kids that were with me said I want to be an NFL player and didn't make a college team, right? Mm-hmm. So at that point, the reality has to set in to say, listen, all right, I'm not going to make the NFL. What am I good at now, right? But you have a set of kids that will keep saying they're going to be a pro student or a pro athlete even after that time has come and passed. And those are the people that fall way behind. And that's where I think the typecast of, you know, the socioeconomic thing kicks in, because at some point they didn't look at the fact that they earned a 4-year college degree and that they could basically make their own future. They're bummed at the world because they didn't make the NFL.
Yeah.
And that's the thing, right? So, you know, it's personal accountability is number one, right? But like you said, it's just the aptitude of these kids that think that the you know, NBA, the NFL, the Major League Baseball is going to be their end goal. And that's going to happen for one kid out of a 1,000, maybe even 10,000, right? That one of them, maybe 100,000 of all the athletes in college, one of them is going to make the pros, right? That's not many. Your odds are not very good.
Right. I mean, you know, I'm getting a little bit, we don't talk about politics here really, but I'm getting a little bit into politics here too, right? You know, because if we're talking about, let's say, a low income, traditionally black neighborhood, right? And a kid is really smart. That really smart kid is probably pretty soon going to realize that no, NASA's not going to come here and want me to, you know, fast track me into getting into be a rocket scientist. It's just not happening in that community. The only way to get out of that community is to be good at sports. And a lot of the time, that what makes you stand out in sports is not necessarily that you score a lot of goals, but also the killer instinct type of thing,
Yeah.
right?
And
So, that's an unfortunate socioeconomic, for the less privileged type of and the ethnic neighborhoods or whatever, right? Many
but
times
but again, too,
that's the only thing that
right.
kids see, right?
But you got to even take one step
So
further back, right? Because, you know, in those environments, right, are those kids going to have access to the best education? Are they going to have access to the same goals? If a kid's super smart in science, but he doesn't have an eighth grade science book, he doesn't have a calculator, he doesn't have a microscope, he doesn't have any of the tools that most high schools would have, right? Or most schools would have. So you have to look at it from, you keep taking, you got to peel the layers back and back, right? And that's a topic for another discussion. But the
yeah, I was
reality
just
is,
gonna say we're getting into a different topic
it's,
there, because
it's
I
right.
have lots of thoughts on that, but
Yeah,
but that's not
and
really
that's
what we
kind of
do.
where I'm going with this, right? Is that when you are limited to what you have, you're limited to what you have. And I think that's the bigger picture, right? Like I said, that's a whole another discussion for another time. And I'm pretty passionate about it, right? Because I want the best for people, right? But let's face it, there are certain groups of kids that are not going to get access to that same education that other groups of kids are going to get access to. And that's just the truth. So whether they rely on their brain or they rely on their muscles, it's one of the two, right?
Yeah, and I'm going to resist the urge here to talk about the education system.
I get it, and that's not right. And that's
Let's leave it at that.
it's yeah,
But
because it's
we can still point at a
sure,
certain fact that a lot of kids see that their way out of their situation is through sports or through music, right?
yeah,
Also, right? Some sort of extraordinary drive that is out of the ordinary for the community that they live in, and
sure.
hoping that they will be discovered
Yeah.
somehow, so they will be yanked out of their situation,
Yeah,
and then
and
they're going to
actually,
come
to
back
be honest
later
with you,
and take
Kelly, as
care of
much as
their
I
family.
stay away from politics and stuff like this, like I love talking about issues like this, though, right? Because I think getting people's perspectives on these topics, right? People that are in the educational system and all the flaws that are there, and all the hardworking teachers that aren't getting the funding that they need to get supplies in their classroom and go out on their own and buy it themselves, right? Like it's a much deeper ingrained issue, right? And that would be the one thing I would love to talk to you about, is like school in Sweden versus school in the United States, right? Because I'm sure there's a ton of differences, but there's probably a lot of similarities as well. But it's just getting the perspective, because growing up in America, right? I was very fortunate enough to go to a very good school system, right? I went to Catholic school as a child, because the public school by my house was very dangerous. There are a lot of gangs, and my parents were like, you're not going to go there. Same with high school. My only high school was Steinmetz. And at that time in the mid 90s, it was a terrible school. A lot of gang violence, stabbing, shootings. My parents are like, you're not going there. And I was like, well, then what are my options? They're like, Holy Cross, Fenwick, or St. Pat's, pick one. And I'm like, okay, so I didn't have many options, right? Where that's, I think, where the amplitude comes from. Now, if I would have picked a Chicago public school, I probably wouldn't be the same person I am today, right? I might not even be here. So it's
Yeah.
it's a different topic for a different time, but it deserves to be said. But like I said, now we're starting to go into the political end of things, and I'm fine with that, right? Like I don't mind talking about it when it comes to stuff like that. But again, we do have a lot of changes that could be made, and we're not changing them. And it starts at the ground level, right? And I'm at the age now where honestly, I don't have kids, and I kind of don't care. So I mean, it's a bad attitude to have, but I mean that's just the reality I face. I don't care about what kids do in school systems now. I'm not there, and it doesn't affect me one bit. Is it a bad stance? I don't know. Maybe I should have more, knowledge in that field, but I don't. It doesn't affect me at all. It doesn't bother me. where I'm sure
Right.
where it matters to you.
Yeah, I think that it should matter to everybody because it's it's really what shapes society, right? It's people coming out of the that system, and I can tell you right away that even though I haven't lived in Sweden for 25 years, from what I know from my family there and their kids and so on, I can tell you that the educational system is more different than similar. The two systems
Would you say
under university.
better or worse, in your opinion?
That's subjective, right?
In your opinion,
You
though.
know, in my opinion, I think that the Swedish version is um, way better. I'm
So,
just
in my
gonna,
opinion, right,
I'll come right out and say it. So
I don't know from many schools, but I think the American public school system is one of the worst things you could do to your child to send them there. That's just my opinion. There are some very good public
yeah,
schools, but overall, I would say that that is a very poor decision. If you could afford to send your kid to a private school, send them to a private school. You're just going to get a better education, a better life out of it. And it's unfortunate to say that because the
yeah,
school system in America is very flawed. It's just like it seems to be everything else we have in our country is great, but there are a lot of flaws, and that is definitely one of them.
yeah. So I mean, there's definitely schools that are better than others, and it very much depends a little bit on where you live. Like if you're in a
Right. If you're in a certain
I mean,
district, and
let's put it this way: a low income area in Sweden is very. It does not really compare to a low income area in the U.S. Like we're still talking about a huge discrepancy here, right?
sure.
Um, People in those low income communities in Sweden might feel like they're kind of like in the U.S., but if they would go there,
I
they
would,
would very quickly
yeah.
understand
I
the
would,
difference.
I would love to pick your brain about.
So they're two different societies that are
I
based
know.
on hundreds of years of a different foundation. So it comes from two very
Sure.
different places. So it's really hard to compare the two,
Yeah.
and that's also why it's hard to say that hey, the U.S. should have an educational system like Sweden. Is like yeah, but you kind of like have to have the tradition too, right? You can't just flip a
Right.
switch and say like, this is how school works. Like it just
Yeah.
doesn't happen that way, unfortunately. It's
Sure.
that's a hard
Yeah.
that's a hard thing to reconcile and accept.
We should do that
Um,
one night in the future, right? Is just talk about
yeah, let's
growing
do
up,
that.
right? Your childhood versus mine and compare contrast because I would love to see like
Yeah,
what stuff you were taught as a kid and things like that and like what you were what a traditional like Swedish household was like versus an American one, right? Like my parents were Italian. Even though we grew up in the United States, we had a lot of traditional Italian values that we
but
incorporated.
American Italian.
Right. But I
American
mean,
Italian is not the same as Italian Italian.
no, of
That's
course.
important.
No, but we did have a lot of the same stuff from the old country that we incorporated in here. When my grandfather came over, it was a lot different, right? Because he knew the ways in Italy. That's where he came from. So it's like, we were, a generation removed, but it was just kind of always nice to see, and I'd love to see what it would be like from your perspective, growing up there, and what values you guys had and what traditions you have, and the school system there, and growing up, and because I'm sure there were a ton of differences, but as a kid, it's kind of the same stuff, right? You like doing the same things for the most part, right?
I'll just, so we're not going to get into it, but I'll just throw one little nugget
Sure.
your way, which is something that even Swedes are jealous about when it comes to Italy and the school system there. So most school systems in Europe, you get lunch supplied, like no charge. There's
Mhm.
food supplied for the kids that are going to school. Like you don't have to bring food, you don't have to pay for food. There's no like there's a cafeteria, but that's in case you want an extra snack or whatever, right? In Italy, all school foods are cooked by hand and is all organic, certified organic food to be super healthy. Like there's really high standards on the food being nutritious, organic, no artificial substances and all that shit. So that's one
Right.
small little nugget I want to send you away in terms of
Yeah.
Italy and the school system, and it says a little bit something too about the care of the children that are attending those facilities.
Nice.
So
All right. Well, we'll
I'll
save
leave
that.
it there for
We'll
now.
save that for a different day because I would love to just pick your brain a little bit to see how that is. And I could tell you my experiences in an American school. Right?
Let's do it.
So we'll do that. But we'll wrap it up for tonight. Obviously, we're past our hour. We always go over time. But I just wanted to say, guys, thanks again for listening to us. We didn't really talk music tonight a whole lot. It was more sports and stuff like that. But hey, we do our thing, right? So again, follow Arsenic Kelly, guys. Is awesome. He's got some songs that just dropped. He's working on his music. Support him. Support his channel. Like him. Share his stuff. I do all the time. And we'll try to come back next Thursday or the Thursday after, but we'll get it done.
I really like your new custom-made neon sign behind you. That's very fancy.
I'm trying to figure out the lighting because it's
very
too
cool.
ambient.
You probably need a small light in front of your
So
face.
here's what, I have like this, right?
There we go.
Right. So I have this.
Now we're talking.
But I feel like having that, like when I turn this light on, it just kills everything. So this was like a mood light, I think, right? So I got to figure something out. I'll work on it.
Yeah, no, but it looks great.
Yeah.
It looks great.
Awesome.
Stepping up in the world, buddy.
That's it.
Yeah, no, all good.
All right.
All right. Cool.
Yep. So we'll try again next Thursday. If that doesn't work, guys, we'll be the Thursday after that. My next podcast, just in case I didn't mention it earlier, I have Raven Black coming on September 14th. It's a Sunday at 4:30. They're awesome. One of my favorite bands, and we're going to go from there. So we'll be back next Thursday. If not, I'll hop on and say hi, keep you guys posted. But again, guys, follow Arsenic. Go to all the major music platforms, streaming platforms. Download the songs. They're awesome. Support Kelly, and good things are coming your way.
Thank you so much.
Awesome. All right, guys, we'll see you on the next one. Take care. Peace.
Cheers.